Greetings. Good evening. Dumela, Saubona, Sakpase, Namaste, Upshin, Dubraota, Assalamu alaikum, Hotep, Buenas noches, bonsoir, and what's going on? Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Digital Couch. My name is Doriel Inez Larrier of Learn to Grow You, Larrier's Education and Resource Network, where I plant seeds to help you grow. Welcome to the last day of this series that we've been doing all this week. I hope you were able to catch it. It is titled A New Class is in Session. All during this week, we have been sitting on the digital couch, right? Teacup in hand, engaging in critical conversations with educational leaders, inspirational leaders who inspire, impact, and encourage their community to live life better. Tonight is the fourth in our series. We are speaking with my guest tonight, all the way from the deep South. We'll talk about that in a second. And this is none other than Dr. Noran Moffett. Before I have him begin to chat, let me just remind you again, this is the fourth in our series. The first person that we spoke with was Dr. Frank Tuitt of the University of Connecticut, and we were speaking about inclusive pedagogy. Day 2, we who was a progressive educator, and we focused on homeschooling and particularly unschooling. And what that means is an option for families, for parents, and for children in this current day. Yesterday, we spoke with Dr. Sharon Smith Sanchez of Taloa Turf International, and we focused on we had so many guests this week. Went like, oh my goodness. Oh, sorry. We focused on trauma-informed education, trauma-informed learning, trauma-informed care. There is no way that we have been through this past year and a half, and we are still in it today. And there's no way that we can go into what's going to come up in the next couple of weeks without recognizing that every single person that participates in the learning and educational structure today has not been traumatized to some degree. And how are educational institutions, families, teachers, administrators, and social service providers going to support the children, the parents, and guess who else? The teachers and the administrators. What kind of plan is going to be enacted so that all participants in the triangle are cared for? Tonight, we're finishing up this part of the series with Dr. Noran Lane Moffett, who is a professor of, let's get this together, of educational leadership focused on transformative education. Dr. Moffett, it's so great to have you on the couch tonight.
Well, Ms. Larrier, if I may, Sister Doriel Inez Larrier, since you are one of the people who actually called my middle name, I'm sure my mother and father, may they rest in paradise, appreciate that.
There's no way I can say your name without saying your middle name.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome to the couch. Excellent. So I know that you have not only letters in front of and behind your name, but you focus on a part of the educational process that we don't normally discuss. And so, again, on Monday, we spoke about higher education from the perspective of institutional capacity, ideology, overarching theories that lead the mission and the vision of inclusivity of voices. We then moved to, one could say, the other end of the P20 spectrum and focused on how parents, again, are making decisions for their children and learning about, if not learning about, but hearing about some options that are available. Then we moved into yesterday, how, again, support services can be provided to not react, but respond to what we're going through and provide some sort of a safety net or some arms to surround, again, the parents, the teachers, the educators. Now, in respects to your focus, you also will be dealing with some ideology, some pedagogy around making sure that we don't stay stuck back where we were, but that we actually move the needle, we move the dial forward so that we could all respond to what's going on around us and act accordingly. Tell us what brought you to this work from your humble beginnings.
And I'll put emphasis on the humble beginnings. And
The humble beginnings.
those humble beginnings really are about my parents. I cannot introduce myself without the memory of the late Reverend M.J. Moffett and Miss Alice Eloise Moffett. Those two human beings, when they were on the planet Earth, whatever is good about me, to them and the ancestors be the credit. Whatever is wrong with me were my children. But my father was a World War II veteran, born and raised in the South, escaped the South because of World War II, was drafted and had to go, came back to get my mother, and they took the real blue book and transversed from the state of Mississippi all the way to California with everything they had, as so many of our people did. But most importantly, I like to call myself a Calicipian, born in California of Mississippi parents.
Okay. I've never heard that. Okay.
This is the first time it has been stated live. You get the honor, Mr. Doriel.
We heard it first here on the digital couch. Excellent.
Phrase I am coining. And I think it's important because part of transformation to me in my life has been never forgetting my roots and the roots that brought me over. And I understand our roots on this soil does not begin here. But it is important to say that who I am is vested in who my parents were, as well as it is to say I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I am a former school bus driver who drove the school bus in the great city of Atlanta while I was getting my HBCU education at the Clark Atlanta University.
Shout out CAU, shout out HBCUs. What's up? Better represent.
By the way, that contributes to why my attire is Black Faculty Matter.
Okay, wait. Lean over here. Lean, there we go. Black Faculty Matters. Yes. Can I have somebody who is watching? Hashtag Black Faculty Matters. So let me just say this. Let me add on. Here on the digital couch, we are not just watchers, we are participators. And so I need for a stream team to raise up. If you see that there is a little, probably a link that says, because I'm hosting on StreamYard, I will not be able to see your name unless you allow StreamYard to see your name. Please be some recorders for us. You are now officially the stream team. If I say, ooh, drop that, or someone type that in the chat, please type that in the chat because it's something that really needs to be reminded of for the both of us so that we can engage in the conversation. We can also hear your questions and comments. And also, there just might be a gem that we need for you to help record this moment for us. So, Black Faculty Matters is the first one. Thank you.
Thank
you. Yes,
you.
Dr. Moffett.
I offered that, if I may, Sister Laria, because for me, it is part and parcel to being able to sit before you right now and your audience, because it was that journey from my parents to driving the school bus that taught me more classroom management than any course I ever had as an education major, as well as going through the process of the Bachelor's of Arts and a double major in history education and middle grades education. And then having the honor, and this goes to the honor of faculty members who thought you're one day going to be a professor. All I wanted to be was a history teacher and a baseball coach. Those were my aspirations. Teach history, coach baseball.
And look at where you are now.
That's where my vision was. But they thought more of me. So one of my mentor professors, for whom this book was written and edited by me and her daughter, Pearls of Wisdom from a Woman of Color, Courage, and Commitment, Dr. Pearlie Craft Dove.
Wonderful.
That wonderful Black woman, may she rest in paradise, was the architect of the education program from which I earned my history education degree and middle grades education degree at Clark College, which is now Clark Atlanta University. And those are the giants for whom I honor for being the people's professor today.
So I'm going to pause just for a second to shout out to certain people who are following us right now. And I'm going to give one reference, and the person who's watching, I know you're watching. So Miss Larrier sees you. That person knows who I'm talking about. Miss Larrier sees you. Okay, let's continue. Go ahead. But I need for people to also share this out. Drop some comments, invite people who you know would be blessed to hear this conversation. Yes, so now you retired Army, CAU, strong, school bus driver. How did you get out of being a school bus driver to now getting on track, and the key is on track, to becoming Dr. Noran Lane Moffett?
Well, the truth is because I didn't come from parents who could drop those coins on me, where I had the opportunity to have scholarships and things that I needed for my daily bread. So I said, wow, since I'm going to be an education major, since this is my life work, I lived in the community, let me go just start driving a school bus. Greatest thing ever happened to me. In fact, when I took on the position of a school bus driver, I had, and for all of those young brothers and sisters and others who have this experience, I had a delay in my education because of financial need. So I had to come back to college. But the school bus driving kept me relevant. The mentors kept me inspired that I would get situated and get back. But most importantly, I learned to teach because of the children in the neighborhoods that I would pick up. And on the way to school, talk about Black history, talk about the community, talk about life. So the pedagogical, transformative nature was being bred in me because of my simply being a school bus driver. So by the time I started student teaching, for my student teaching experience, and shout out to Frederick Douglass High School and those mentors who I knew there, because again, none of us get to this place without there being people who contributed. Coach Marion McMillan, who allowed me to be his assistant coach, because I love sports, as it's known, and I believe that the phrase I like to use is that I always thought I would be an athletic academician. You want to hashtag that one? That was first here.
There we go. Athletic academician. Those of you who know how to spell it properly, drop it in the comments.
That is an important segue, because I did have the opportunity to fulfill those dreams of teaching social studies at a middle school and coaching baseball. So those aspirations took place, but there was always someone in my ear saying, you need to profess. First, it was you need to be a principal. So I got the MSA, Masters of School Administration, from Fayetteville State University in North Carolina.
Shout out, another HBCU.
And then the teaching and moving into, quote, P12 administration and choosing to teach in the neighborhood where the children look like me, look like you, and look in a very diverse rainbow of children who were black, white, Latinx. And again, for those of you who are into the exact terminologies today, forgive me for not using them. I'm going historical here. But it's important, Ms. Laria, that I articulate to you that teaching in the public school and moving into getting the degree in administration toward the principalship, or for me, instructional leadership, because I always love curriculum first. It became important when one of those professors, who had also been a Clark Atlanta graduate for her doctorate, was one of my professors in my master's program. And we had a commonality of, wait a minute, so you went to CAU. I got my doctorate at CAU. That professor says, yes, you're going to go back into the school system and do that administrative work, but don't stay there. You have another calling. You need to help make future educators and future administrators. And that started the journey of my going back to obtain the doctorate in educational leadership with a focus on curriculum and research at the Clark Atlanta University. So that was the full circle.
Okay, so you started at CAU, you went to Fayetteville State, you went back to Clark Atlanta,
and met my last mentor, who then said, no, you should not go back to P12. You need to stay in higher ed. Because originally I wanted to, again, I then wanted to go back and be a curriculum specialist in the public school setting for social studies. But may he rest in paradise, lived in New York. My last mentor on the journey, Dr. Ernest J. Pete Middleton, who at once was dean of the College or School of Education and the New York system at Oswego.
Oswego. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Middleton just recently passed, and I would do a dishonor to myself not to mention him, because he provided me, because I'm mid-career now. At the time I chose to go back and obtain the doctorate. But Dr. Middleton provided me with the Williamhurst Fellowship to work on the doctorate, which relieved some of the stressors of financial, so I did it full time. I stopped working. A lot of my own doctoral students, they have to continue to work full time. I gave up the job because I knew I wanted to focus on educational leadership and research. And fortunately, Dr. Middleton, may he rest in paradise, recently passed, and now a retired, extraordinary Black woman that I have to give her praise. Because this is about giving other people, you don't become transformative on your own. Other people have to empower you. Dr. Dorcas Bowles was the provost at Clark Atlanta at the time. And Dr. Dorcas Bowles was a woman who saw something in me I didn't see. That she reinforced that you need to stay in higher ed, and so did the professors along the way. My dissertation chair, Dr. Ganga Prasad, my dissertation committee, Dr. Trevor Turner, Dr. Melanie Carter.
So can I ask a question? And because you're dropping a lot of names.
Yeah.
These are all people who were at CAU and Fayetteville State, and they all looked like you?
Everyone that I have named did, with the exception of Dr. Ganga Prasad, who has spent his career working. He was Indian from India, but he was born and raised in Guyana.
So this is incredible, because I can name I want to say on one hand, if there's an additional finger, maybe the number of faculty who looked like me, who was in my track. Okay, in my track. And that means that I sat under them while pursuing, let's say, bachelor's, master's, additional coursework here and there and everywhere. And so you're running off. You're running off these names. This is wonderful. So someone please, like hashtag again, thank you, Sister Annie, Black Faculty Matters, because it does. This is incredible. So,
yes, ma'am. That is why I wanted to pay homage to them, because I do not believe any of us can be transformatively engaged in teaching, because transformational leaders empowers others to act. So how can I model that behavior if I can't recite for you at least some of those who contributed to my transformation?
Excellent. So we have these people these heroes and sheroes who sit on your shoulders, who are in your jacket pocket, who are in your back pocket, who are constantly feeding words of wisdom, who are constantly right. Yeah. So actually someone is asking, can't keep up with all those names. Are they still in the academy? So apparently, thank you, my stream team. Thank you, stream team. So apparently they still are in the academy, with the exception of the person, God rest their soul, who has just transitioned, right? So they're still in the academy.
Are the person for whom I say who is at the backbone of my experience, Dr.
Beautiful.
Pearlie Craft Dove, and her mentee, Dr. Aurora Cooks, was the first professor when I was just an undergrad, who literally, I have to give that respect, who offered me the opportunity as a graduate teaching assistant to teach the first class in teacher education, in educational leadership, introduction to educational leadership, before I have an earned doctorate. What I'm suggesting is these were folks who saw in me what I didn't see in me.
So if I could take a note, if I can take a little gem from that, just that those who are leading the way probably have already been, I'm saying this lovingly, indoctrinated with, there's a few of us in front, we need more behind. Let's go take a look at those who may or may not be on the path and snatch them on the path to be with us, to lead the way. So that means that they're looking at a great, I'm going to use a biblical reference here, a great cloud of witnesses, and they're picking, well, you know what, this person, and let me say this, those of you who already know, who are in academia or connected with academia or who have gone through the halls of academia, you know that there will always be someone that comes early. And I mean a student that, in terms of showing up in class, comes early. Maybe they stay late. They probably are asking a lot of questions. They're probably taking good use of office hours. They're probably, well, this is before email, but they probably showed up at the office for office hours. Or when the instructor gives feedback, like Dr. Moffett, I'm sure now, they probably responded to the feedback and say, "Oh, can I ask you, how can I make this better?" You cannot. It is difficult to sit in the back of the room, slide in, slide out, don't raise your hand, don't participate in conversations, and then get upset. Well, why wasn't I chosen to help, how come I'm not closer to the professor? And the relationship with your instructors. And now I'm not just saying higher education, but your relationship with your instructors from P through 20 is crucial, because here it is 20 years later, 30 years later, you're not only able to drop those names, but I'm sure if you now, with our technology, you can send an email, a text, a message, Skype, WhatsApp, whatever, and they will most likely respond saying, "Oh my goodness, it's Noran Moffett. I'm sure this is going to be intellectual discourse. Let me see what this brother is up to right now." And that's the relationship is part and parcel to transformation. Am I on a good note there?
Not only are you on a good note, you crystallize it far better than I. And I think part of what you've done by putting the glow on that is when people use terms take on, in my humble view, 4 lives. They take on the life of what the receiver believes they mean, or interpret or reinterpret them to be. They clearly take on the life of what the sender intended for them to mean. They take on a third life of what those who take them on secondary and tertiary cause them to go out in the atmosphere. It's a little exercise we used to do. Some people may still do it. You whisper a message in someone's ear in a round circle. And
telephone
knows that message around to see by the time it gets back, does the same message come out as it was from the beginning? So when I operationalize transformative learning, it is for me, if I leave nothing else to this most sacred space that you've created, the ideal that if you are an educator in a system of oppression, you're either a revolutionary or an oppressor. Those aren't my words. Those are Lerone Bennett Jr.'s.
Hold on. Say that again. Stream team, show up.
It has been attributed to Dr. Lerone Bennett Jr. that an educator in a system of oppression is either a revolutionary or an oppressor. For those who follow the Christian faith, the disciples of Jesus spread his message farther than he ever did. That's transformational. The followers of Prophet Muhammad spread, peace be upon him, spread his message farther than he ever did. Confucius' messages have been spread much farther than he ever walked. Buddha, and likewise, the most important thing about anyone who, in my humble view, purports to exude transformational leadership in any space, do you empower others to act and not to park their lips at your gluteus maximus?
Okay, so now let me just drop a name, because towards the end of that little run you just did, you actually sounded like our dear brother out at Cal State, Dr. Maulana Karenga, professor of Kawaida theory and father of Kwanzaa. So, woo, that's a lot. All right, so let's see how we can shift to. You definitely discussed of course, your current role and responsibility of being a professor of educational leadership in transformative education. You've definitely discussed your inferred, not just academic roles, but probably also some social action, because of course your work spans, yes, all throughout the institution, but I'm sure there's some related outside connections as a result of your work, namely let's say the book that you've written, panels that you've spoken on. I know that people who do doctoral work and are supervisors of doctoral students also have to sit on other committees. I want us to move into the question of, given what we've gone through, and now let's sort of take a look at critical race theory, which has been on everybody's lips, on everybody's mind, somehow, some way. how can we use the theme of transformative education moving into what's going to happen in the fall, using the lens of, is the same educational, or are the same educational paradigms, whether they be focused on Western theory, patriarchal societies, the need for more diversity, equity, inclusion. What do you think a new class in session is going to look like? What do you think all the stuff that's been happening to us over the past 2 years? What do you think what shape shifting do you think is going to occur for what we're going to go through in this next year?
Well, without the benefit of a crystal ball, if I had that, I would pick the Mega Million or Powerball. But but I will offer humbly that there are pathways, I believe. So let's look at, as you articulated so well, P through 20. There has to be, in my humble view, a pathway for a new class being in session by raising the stakes on being positioned to ensure that the digital divide is no longer a phrase that can be used relevant to the least of thine. That every child in every neighborhood that is dependent upon seeking or having a facilitator of their knowledge, an educator at every level, that their access is not dependent upon their income.
Let me just rephrase that or repeat that their access is not dependent upon their income. That sums it up greatly.
We learned in the last year, if nothing else, I hope that message from the pandemic is clear, because your digital couch is a reminder of how we can reach and teach each other. But what about those folks who don't have access or who are dependent upon access? So if your only way of being connected is a smartphone, then you at least need to have access to a smartphone with the features that the young people know much better than I, the younger people, because I'm still claiming mine because I run. But if I have to be very sincere with you about what it needs to look like, we cannot move into a space in the fall where people will fundamentally suggest that we no longer need to put funds into ensuring that everyday kind of people and their children do not have access, and that their access is relevant, it is continuous, and we are not waiting for someone to say that there's stimulus money needed in order for them to ensure that they continue to have high usage and available internet access so that they are able to explore and learn from all of the platforms. Now, why I suggest that to you is that I've stayed in this space primarily of being a professor because most of my professionals, I don't even call those who reach the doctoral stage a student anymore. I call them doctor professionals. They are mainly people who are either teachers, instructional leaders, administrators in P12, or those who are going into higher ed. So my role, and I speak as an individual, but my role at my role now at Fayetteville State University, formerly at Clark Atlanta University, was as a tenured professor and is as a tenured professor in the Department of Educational Leadership. Now, I'm saying that because the most powerful ally that we must empower, that the digital couch can empower, are those who are in the position to shape policy in administrative and leadership roles. All of us need to ask the question, does that person who's in that role embrace the technology and embrace access to the technology to the least of that? Because if it's not in the face, if it's not in the house, if it's not in the home, if it's not in the project, if it's not in the backwoods area, wherever there are children
Right.
who need access, we should not have to have a pandemic to remind us that the availability of digital platforms for the learner should never be subject to a pandemic. That's my humble view.
You're right. You're right. 1 second. I do hope that there is sound. If there is sound, I need whoever can hear me on Facebook to give me either a thumbs up or tell me that, yes, there is sound. I just got notification. Okay, great. I do want to read a comment that's just come through. So this is actually one of my college mates who actually got me into, for me, the best school that could have accepted me. And she says, as a technician, thank you so much. Great. As a technician, I also try to push the program and design learning platforms that can be reached at lower data speeds and visually simple so that the person who doesn't have the latest and greatest smartphone can still access the learning platform.
That's sister or brother. That's a
sister.
transformative leader.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about. And if nothing else comes from the opportunity to be with you, Sister Laria, I hope that the idea that all of us are in the position to facilitate transformative learning, participate in transformative learning, or more importantly, I hope, to ensure transformative learning is in the possession of the least of thine. Because at the end of the day, my personal motto has always been, when people ask me and say, what is your philosophy of education? I'm an educational evangelist. And for me, I have not done anything if the children with the least opportunity are not being impacted by those who come through my facilitation so that they can compete with the children with the greatest opportunity.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I am responsible for hopefully those doctoral candidates coming through the HBCU where I'm honored to serve and wherever else I may serve, that I love teaching educational research, not for intellectual, I won't use that term, that's barbershop, not for the purpose of someone's intellectual high, but for the purpose of planting seeds of intellectual transformation through those who are in the position to make a difference. And that's why we have to have faculty who understand it's not about us. The transformative leader, the transformative teacher, the transformative educator, the transformative barber, they leave you with beautician. They leave you empowered. When people leave the barbershop or the beauty shop, the goal is to look better. Well, for the transformative leader, the goal should be not that you look good, but someone tells you that what you gave them made them good. And
made them better than when they walked into your door.
Then that's transformative.
Right. So let me just update. So the person who is part of my stream team is a director of IT at 5 community colleges. Five. Yes. And 2 of them are urban and 2 are very rural. And specifically, it says white kids on the farms can be left out too. And so, yes, the least of these does not have a racial priority.
Absolutely.
The least of these is who has been, come on, say it with me, disenfranchised, right? Marginalized, set aside. And if, in the words of Malcolm, hoodwinked and bamboozled. No, not laughing about that, but yes, right. So,
But you're absolutely right. And all due respect, I'm glad you gave a shout out to Rule. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me was to have had the opportunity to teach in a rural area along my pathway. So my educational experience has been both rural and urban. And that is why when you ask the question about a new paradigm or new class being in session, when I use the terminology, the children with the least opportunity, I mean every child. Every child should have the opportunity to compete with the children who have the greatest opportunity. And that, to me, fundamentally is at the root of the transformative spirit that I hope to leave on this planet.
And you are doing that, and you know that you're doing that. You know that you're doing that. I'm going to take a moment for those of you who are here, who are still here. If you saw this at the beginning and you dropped off, then you're going to miss it. Only those people who are here in the middle are going to hear how the two of us met. All right, you ready? We're going to keep it short. I visited my childhood best friend, who's still my best friend, while she was a student at Clark Atlanta University. They start earlier. I finished one of my legs of education, and I came to visit some family. She said, Doriel, I got this professor who sounds a lot like you. I was like, what? And she said, yeah, I'm going to ask permission. Can you come and sit in on a class with me? You have got to meet this person. I was like, okay. So here class with my childhood best friend, and we're still like this today. And I walk into the room, and I'm just trying to be quiet. And he introduces himself, and he speaks, and I'm sitting there like, I never had a professor like this. And I said to her on that day, I said, I hope you take copious notes, because you are going to learn much more than you think from this brother. I don't know what he's been through, let's say what is on his back, meaning like where he got all this energy. And this is just from day one of the class. I said, but you need to take some good notes, because he's going places. That was, let's just say, at least 3 decades ago. And here we are today on the digital couch, still in conversation about transformative work. Now, I don't know, Dr. Moffett, if were you a teacher's assistant at that time, or?
I was that again, standing on the shoulders of giants. I was offered the opportunity to be the teaching assistant as I was working on a graduate degree for the professor who was the mentee of Dr. Dove. You see how it carried on. Dr. Dove, who had retired, had a mentee, Dr. Aurora Cooks, who was the department chair, who had been my professor in educational program, and she hired me as and turned the class again. She entrusted me with the course Introduction to Teacher Education.
Fabulous. And here we go. At least 3 decades later, we're sitting here, and you are now Dr. Noran Moffett. I am extremely, extremely proud to not only know you, but be in conversation with you on this transformative work that you've done. Now, of course, for those of you who don't, I have conversations with people that I know who I bring on the couch. Most people I know for some time. You and I have dropped names. We've, shared articles, shared books, shared lectures that have been not just in the forefront of our mind, but like really sit in the foundation of our work. And a couple that we usually throw, around loosely is Dr. Nathan and Julia Hare, We'll also throw around the names of, let's see, like Naeem Akbar, Dr. Jawanta Kunjufu. Those of you who can take notes, fine. It's okay. I'll probably go back and add these names into the link as well. Some of the people who are at the forefront of, let's say, the pages of their books are dog-eared, right? What would be, let's say, the top 3 books that you would say to your dissertation students now? Because I don't want to sit on, let's say, first year teacher prep or first year educational philosophy. Let's get beyond Freire, right? Pedagogy of the oppressed. Let's get beyond even a theorist that we spoke of yesterday, which was Bronfenbrenner and the bioecological theory. Let's get beyond Piaget, the foundations of child, or the 4 stages of child development. But who would be, so I'm proud of myself that I remembered all that. Authors, texts, theorists who align themselves with transformative education.
It would
Transformative theory. They could, of course, come from psychology, sociology.
I mean, there are so many, but if I start with the premise of the question, if I understood the 3 books, I'll start with the premise you gave me, was when I'm talking to those wonderful human beings who decide to come back and get their doctorate, to go back into the world and be transformative. The first one I remind them of, and some have read it and some have not, I always go back to Carter G. Woodson and the Miseducation of the Negro.
My book is right over there. Dog-eared.
When you can talk about a book that was published in the 1930s in 2021, that
is still relevant, and you would think that the book was written about 5 years ago.
A seminal piece of work, okay? I believe that, for me, when I'm asked what are the 3 that probably, if you were to ask any of the recent graduates this year in 2021, I've been humbled to have had 6 doctoral candidates to defend their dissertation and can now be called doctors. One of my beloved coaches in the world who received his doctorate says, you make doctors, Doc. But his terminology was meant to say, you try to set people free. But I start with, even though if people tell me they've read it, to read The Miseducation of the Negro at different eras of your own transformation and development,
right.
You go back to it and you read it with a different lens because you have evolved and grown. So I usually like to ask people what I ask myself every day. The first book one should read in the morning is the book in the mirror. Who are you? Read yourself and be true to yourself. But The Miseducation of the Negro, without question. I still believe that a book that has to be reconstructed in our configuration of thought is W.E.B. Du Bois, The Black Reconstruction in America, from 1860 to 1880.
I'm going to type that in, Black Reconstruction in America.
Now, I suggest that book because our country needs, regardless of race, creed, color, or national origin, to go back and understand why Reconstruction in this country's history is one of the most fundamental components of our rising above the isms and schisms, as Bob Marley would say, that hold us back. Because if we aren't true to ourselves about why we failed as a country in ensuring that the Reconstruction period worked, even though there were things that came out of Reconstruction, and there again, I have to give credit to professors at my beloved alma mater who made us read about Reconstruction so that we would understand that the Black members of the Reconstruction legislatures in the South in particular, one of the things that they moved for was free public education, what we now call P through 12, because they understood coming out of enslavement that the education was empowering. But what we have to, I suggest at the doctoral level and anyone, is transformative. Black Reconstruction in America. Thirdly, you said 3. The third one that, if I'm asking people, and this is the one that I actually had a forum with one of my dear colleagues, Dr. Linda Wilson-Jones, with doctoral candidates in our program, and that is another Carter G. Woodson book, by the way, and that is the education of the Negro prior to 1861. I didn't have that prop with me.
That's a wait. So show me the second. Show me the second book again. Show me the one that you just had again.
Black Reconstruction in America by Du Bois.
Got it. Okay.
The Education of the Negro Prior to 1861 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. It matters not how many degrees you have or don't have. What those 3 books do for everyone in this country, it puts in context the education of our people and those who contributed to them who were not of African descent, and the importance of education. Because to me, at the root of becoming a transformational leader, whether you're choosing advanced degree or no degree, is knowing the stories of what people struggled for to make education a number 1 priority in this nation.
So let me hop in on that because we have been in this. We've been in this moment of college, advanced degree, college, advanced degree, college, advanced degree as almost like the be all and end all of the great American dream. And I'm just going to keep it to the great American dream. And there are times that we think, think go to college, or let's say you get a trade. Those people who make a decision, let's say in their families, that their children, when they see the spark, that this child will feel, let's say, happier, feel more productive, feel like they are contributing better to the society within a trade. And so post high school work, or even in high school, they should start being tracked for a trade. And then they go into, like a union or being a journeyman, or the steps in that light. Oftentimes, the thinking of, I don't need to study history. I don't need to know the story of, what happened 30, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, 100 years ago. Why do I need to do that? I'm going into, let's say, plumbing. I'm going into contract work. I'm going into electrical engineering. I'm going whatever. For the purpose of understanding your place, your role, your story in the continuum of whatever it is that your hands are put to do is crucial. And I must say that is probably, if I had to confess, so let's parenthetically, everyone who's watching, Dr. Moffett is homegrown HBCU.
All degrees.
Right. Bachelor's, master's, ed degree, doctorate. I, the opposite end of the spectrum, PWI. Those people don't know what that is, private white institutions. I'm okay with that. That's probably the one aspect or perspective that we didn't get. I will, though, explain our desire to learn for me. Let me just say for me and my crew, because earlier this week when I spoke to my big brother, we did have to say that, there were some people who had blinders on and they were just like, even though I have, richly hued melanated skin, I am just like everybody else. And when we heard that, we just sat back and was like, just watch and wait. Sure as it would happen, some period during the 4 years, they were just like, oh my goodness, I'm not like everybody else. Oh, okay. We told you that. But let me get back on track. There's probably the perspective that we did not get from the onus of, I am surrounded by people who look like me and we are moving together to find our place together. In an institution that is not an HBCU or where there's at least a greater diverse body of students of deeper melanated hue, go through, and this is a whole separate conversation. Many books have already been written about this, movies have been written about this, journals, articles, etc., symposiums. There is a desire to say, wow, so there's a class on Reconstruction. There's a class on U.S. history, just U.S. history. The teacher who's teaching it doesn't look like me. And when I go to take the class, because I'm one of those students, I sat there and I said, just feels like something's missing. Or it feels like there's other parts of the story that aren't told. Or it feels like the stories that are told from a skewed perspective. Just like, now you and I have had this conversation decades ago, that the state decides how the textbooks are written. When I found that out as I was doing my ed leadership work, I found that out. And then I said, and we had to do a little research project. We looked at, let's just say, a social studies textbook that was written in Texas. You know where I'm going with this. Then we looked at the same topic that was written from a state in the North. In terms of who won, we were like, wait a minute. Are you telling me that students across the country are learning this same event, but from a different lens? And then those students will then travel throughout, let's say, the country just because of nature, moving, whatever, with a different perspective on who has power and who does not have power, or who should be in leadership and who should not be in leadership, or who, you know what I'm saying? I said, that's incredible. That's incredible. So in reference to transformational leadership, as you are raising educators, and you have done so for more than 30 years, and specific, are you there?
Yes, you broke up on my end. The last I heard was when you raise up educators, that there was a little static after that on my end.
Okay, no problem. We're gonna sort of then narrow down if there's breakup. I don't want that to happen moving forward. So we can then just have a part 2. Okay. But as you're raising educators, what is most critical about perspective? We have to do things differently than we've done before. We've talked about the educational divide. We've talked about access to technology, content that has to be consistent with the story, not my story or his story, right? Not the mystery or history. Oh, I like that. But the story. How do you encourage your educators to go to the source? Like how many versions of the source do you have them go to before they say, yes, this is what I'm going to teach? Yes, this is what I'm going to stand on. Because once I learned that, I was like, wow. So if I have to go to the South to teach, I can't necessarily come with the Northern attitude. I actually have to kind of learn the Southern perspective in order to teach the story according to how they want it taught.
Well, I think Dr. Dove, if I can, Sister Laria, Dr. Dove used to tell us in her lifetime something that I've never forgotten. And I think if I had to give you a very clear, honest answer about that, when we're talking about the story, the battle over curriculum is as much of a battle as any other battle for education. Okay. Carter G. Woodson, I never get the quote exactly right, but basically, one can Google Carter G. Woodson's quote about he who controls um, the, your thinking pretty much controls your action. Um, so, if I had to honestly tell you, when being a professor in ed leadership, I always make it very clear that I'm an independent. Okay.
And look at the quote that was just given.
Wow. Wow.
That's a
Thank
little
you.
sister of mine. That's a little sister of mine. I may have to help you with that, because I know you and love your children. Excellent.
Much respect. What I hope more than anything, that transformatively speaking, using it in context to what I hope my life story will be when others tell it will be that I always try to suggest the battle over what is true has to be a battle that evolves around everything that we learn to be true as we dig for the truth. Notice true and truth.
Right.
Now, for the reason I mentioned Reconstruction, because all of what anyone wants to say about the teaching of U.S. history, one of my beloved best undergraduate teacher, may she rest in peace, got her doctorate, I believe, from Columbia University way back in the day, as the young people would say. Um, she would always tell us, you cannot teach Black history if you don't know white history. What you cannot do, now that's how she put it. We're talking about the 80s. She put it that way. Now I'll rephrase it to say this. If I'm going to talk about, there is a fact that in 1860 there was an election. That 1860 election led to the election of Abraham Lincoln. Now, from that point, how we describe the events that occurred between 1860 and 1865 will be in the hands of whoever has the power to not only write the book, develop the curriculum, but who also in every local school district and every state agency has the authority to determine what will be the fundamental facts. Am
Right.
I making sense? Like,
Yes, because
if I had to leave anything with you about from the P12 environment, I don't want to have a discussion over right and left. I want to have a fair discussion about, let's be honest about what occurred after the election of 1860. Now, you can have your perspective in the South and the North. We cannot erase the fact there were a group of people who fought for the preservation of the Union, and there were a group of people who fought for the right to start their own states or their own nation called the Federate States of America. Now, whether your perspective is that the Civil War was fought over economics, or the end of slavery, to me, is secondary to the fact it was fought, and at the end, there was a winner and a loser. now, now, however you feel about it, and I'm trying to keep it real, so that's why I call myself the people's professor, because I'm not going to try to intellectualize this. All of the other intellectual stuff, you can take it and do whatever you want to with it. But a group of people get elected to school boards, they get elected to state houses, they become teachers, they become professors. At the end of the day, parents have to decide, do I want my children to understand fundamentally that after 1860, some folks got mad with who got elected, some other folks did not. A war took place. There were a group of people of African ancestry who were held in chattel enslavement under the existing constitution at the time. And when that war ended, it ended. Now, we can argue over all of the other extremities, but we cannot argue about what happened. And we should not have to argue about what should have happened to make the nation better and those people who suffered under enslavement. I do not get into the arguments over what intellectual disposition should be or should not be. Let's just make sure, tell the children the truth. A little child, whether that child is working on a farm, whether that child is from Flatbush, whether that child is from
Got a
Compton,
shout out, Flatbush.
whether that child is from any region of this country, that child at whatever grade level the history or the social studies is taught should be given the truth about that event. And there should be parents and educators, regardless of their political philosophy, social philosophy, etc., who should be able to admit this is what happened, this is what should have happened. There were amendments changed to the Constitution, and for those like me who came from parents who served, and a son who served, and cousins and other folks, the one important thing that we should also be willing, those of us who call ourselves Black activists, are those who will call ourselves woke or social conscious, let's at least acknowledge that the struggle for making it a more perfect union is rooted in our ability to continue to empower educators to teach truths that are not subject to political pandering. And if we can do that, teach truth that is not subject to political pandering, if we can do that, and that includes admitting that at least that document can be amended over and over again. And if we don't have people educated to say, I want a better nation, then we'll continue to fight the Civil War all over again and every other war that does not lead to a society where we all appreciate the goodness in each other.
Now to drive this, I and shout out. So let me say for the record that I am one of those progressive educators, and those people who know me, if you know me, we don't even have to have this conversation because I speak about this all the time. When I am in front of a group of people that it is my charge to instruct. If people do not know me prior, they will hear from their child or their children, that's what you learn in school? Oh, we finally got somebody who's teaching a little more of the truth than what it says in the book. There are some people who say, well, why don't you teach what's in the book? Because there's gaps of what's in the book. I'm not letting my students leave with half truth.
That's transformative.
That's transformative. And, for the record, during this past year, the groups of people that I was in front of, they got the education that's in the book, and then they got the gaps filled, and they also got Only a couple of people understand this. They got a daily dose of EWF. If you do not know what EWF is, you're going to have to look that up. But that was part of transformative education. Now,
Exactly.
we're going to bring this home. Transformative education. I know. Transformative education doesn't just start with middle school, high school. It begins not even at the P level through 20. It begins in the home. And so let me say to those families who are watching, and I know some amazing families are watching, when your child steps across whatever threshold during these next couple of weeks, and if you are in the South, then your children will be stepping across thresholds within the next few days. You have a relationship, you have an obligation, and in some districts that more than others, you have a relationship with your principal, with your school district. Please join I think here we call it the CEC in New York City, which is like a district-wide parent policy committee. It's the best way to say it. You have, in some places that I've lived, parents can actually make an appointment to see the superintendent, and that appointment is like validated. Like you can go and have a chat with the superintendent. Go to those meetings and ask the question. And I'm speaking now about critical race theory. I'm speaking about transformative work. I'm speaking about from when to have my child learn about who they are in whatever the context is. Because from social studies, starting in second grade, third grade, which nationally the agenda has shifted in the past 3 or 4 years for the purpose of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so the gates have been widened. You have every right. Like some people have said, hey, I want this in the curriculum, and now it's there. You have every right to say, is my child being represented, or my family being represented, or my community, my culture, my historical background, is it being represented appropriately? And if they don't move, the more parents who step up and say, we're not seen here, or the story is not being projected correctly, go move some muscle. Go move some muscle to get that story said. You have every single right. One second, let me just mention one book. There's a book that I use in some of my instruction, and it is called Beyond the Bake Sale. If someone can type that in, Beyond the Bake Sale. It is a wonderful, wonderful text that focuses on how educational institutions, and now I'm sort of speaking of, let's say the P12, should not necessarily, that parents should not necessarily be brought into, let's say, the building just for the bake sale. Don't just call me in when it's time to like raise funds for a cupcake sale or a plant sale or a a chocolate bar sale, or for this gets under my skin every day, the multicultural night. Don't just invite me in then and then just say, well, that's all I need you for. And I spoke about Head Start being that advocacy institution that is run by the federal government, that's led by the federal government, that teaches families to have advocacy from birth. From birth. I am a part of the leadership team. I am a part of the curriculum team. I am a part of even the hiring process. And that other institutions within the, let's say, the K-12 world should adopt that same model. The Head Start model is a great model, and that model should be used however it is in different varieties. And if it's not, parents can feel on the outside and then only feel welcome at the bake sale, because that is a part of transformation. When families' voices are heard, when the children's voices are heard, and there is a greater move of, and I'm going to speak for the New York City public school system, that the voice of children is having slowly but surely more weight in the overall report card of the school, which I think is very powerful. So not just parents are asked to give a survey of how is the school doing. The teachers, of course, are asked annually to answer the question, how is the school doing? Let's say the support staff is asked, how is the school doing? But children are now, and that voice is giving weight. Transformation will happen And we're not expecting it to happen in one day, 1 week, 1 year, but it will happen when more people's voices, who are the recipients to these policies and decisions, are given weight. And the school is doing it, some churches are doing it, some other, let's say, especially organizations and foundations are moving towards that. And I'm just going to say equity model. It may not be the right word, but let's just say model of transformation, because when all voices are heard, and they are the stakeholders feel, I'm here, I'm serving, I'm giving my time, my blood, sweat, and tears to an extent. I need for my voice and my feelings to be seen, written on the wall. Thank you so much, Dr. Moffett. I know you're going to give a final statement, but thank you so much for offering your perspective on how you stand on the shoulders of great people who have walked before you, done critical research, literally, and I'm going to throw in a little hype song, started from the bottom, now you're here, right? Who else has a story like that, of starting as a school bus driver, and now you can be waving from the inside of the halls of academia at those bus drivers and say, hey, I was where you are. And you can be telling the truth. And also working with dissertation students to transform them in their journey of being educators for today and tomorrow.
Well, in all due respect, again, I'm honored to be on the digital couch. I'm honored to be sipping spring water mixed with a little lemon juice. That's it, because as a runner, that's about as far as I go, strong as I get. But if I was going to conclude with an important part that was a part of the prepared questions, and I'm glad that we went organic. To me, the future is in those who, as Malcolm said, prepared themselves today. There's a extraordinary educator by the name of Dr. Lakeisha Darden. I'm humbled to have been her dissertation chair. She's a librarian. And when I work with doctoral candidates in my humble role, my objective is for them to develop a brand. That their dissertation is not just something so that someone will give you the intellectual high of someone calling you doctor, because that means anything. My uncle said it best. If you call yourself doctor, who you gonna help make better? But what Dr. Darden did with her dissertation, she chose Coretta Scott book awarded juvenile or children's books, and she chose several of them to have been read by non-white people in leadership roles, and then to ask them to see how did it help them shape their perspective about Black children and Black people. So she actually took books written about Black and brown children and put them in the hands of folks who may not have normally read them. And they were Coretta. I'm sure those of you who are, particularly my beloved P through 6 educators, who know that children's literature, it's so important that children get their hands on good material that represent the spectrum of humanity. But I shout her out because, again, empowering her to be able to do a dissertation on her passion was for me as important as anything, because she proved that you can produce a study based on children's book and to then determine how non-Black people in a fairly quote unquote conservative environment, how it helped shape their perspective on folks who look like the children represented in the book. Powerful sister, Dr. Lakeisha Darden.
Excellent.
Dr. Victoria L. Martin, newly minted, another one of my doctoral candidates. So I'm going to close talk because I want to do for others what was done for me, who just completed her doctoral study on the sophomore slump. So for those of you who are parents that will be sending your students to whatever college or university in the coming year or years, there's a thing that Victoria L. Martin wrote about called the sophomore slump. And that sophomore slump is something that she said we can overcome so that students don't have the slump. Okay? That was what her study about. Dr. newly minted Lieutenant Colonel retired, Dr. Charles E. Pimble, 74 years old, who just defended his dissertation, does not need the degree. 74 years old, and did his study on his passion, and that is financial aid and how we need to understand financial aid. And I am humbled to have had served his study because he was a man who graduated from high school in 1968, retired from the military, retired as a civilian, came back to get his doctorate at the Fayetteville State University's doctoral program, and doesn't need to work, but he wants to contribute to the importance of parents and others understanding why we need to understand how financial aid works. Transformative research leading to making a difference. Dr. Grace Chavis, a native of Kenya, who has degrees in biology and chemistry and chose to get her doctorate in leadership and did her study on the importance of STEM education and advancing more women and men of color in STEM fields, science, technology, education, and math. Just finished her doctorate, and her study is about increasing the number of educators in STEM. Newly minted Dr. Tasha Bayard, who completed her study in the midst of being pregnant with new life in her first journey into motherhood, just did her dissertation defense in July, and it was on another passion of mine, and that is veterans and military members and spouses who go back to get advanced or graduate degrees. Her study focused on the importance of them. Coach, now Dr. Tyrone Jones, because y'all know I still love my athletics. This brother, a football coach, shout out to LeBron James, more than an athlete. We're talking about, this is a black man from the Maryland, D.C. area originally, who migrated through while he was coaching football, finished his doctorate, and I served him as his dissertation chair. And his study is on making a difference for Black student athletes to advance and succeed in college. This brother is a newly minted doctor who is a dynamo, low-key, powerful man who talks about the importance of getting the education while you're going through athletics. When I talk to you about transformation, and for all of those doctoral candidates who do not, and I have not mentioned your name, like Dr. Letitia Johnson-Arnold, who talked about the importance of holistic health while you're going through your educational experience. Her whole study last year, one of the first from my experience who literally did her study during the early part of the pandemic in 2020, but because we used the technology ahead of time, it didn't stop the show. Am I making sense to you, sister?
One pandemic ain't gonna stop no show. You have done an amazing, amazing work at minting these transformational leaders in education, and not just in education, because of course their work is spanning across disciplines, whether it be in, like you said, in STEM, in athletics, in history, in whatever in holistic practice, right, in wellness. You being the leader for these young, and I want to say young people. Let's just say young because they are young in mind because they were able to do this work. I want to just let this last quote come up, and this was branding for a doctoral student.
Yes, that. Yes, ma'am. The person who posted that, ultimately, the reason I wanted to shout them out, because what I impart to them is that let your doctoral degree create a brand. where you're not just getting a doctor for someone to call you doctor, because I could care less if no one ever uses that. Let Noran Moffett's name stand on making someone else's life better through the process. So what I tell them is, like for example, an a very powerful sister who's from Minnesota, who is, and people make the assumption, I'm glad to have to disavow that if you have it. Melissa Lyon is a European American woman from Minnesota who grew up on a farm that came and received her doctorate at our HBCU. I served as her dissertation chair, and last year, and her whole study was about community engagement within higher education, and how it is important for those of us who are teaching or delivering to be partners with the community. Because an educational experience that only allows you to increase your vocabulary but decrease your capacity to serve people is nothing but intellectual pandering. And I refuse to be that. I remain the people's professor.
On that note, I want to say thank you so much, Dr. Noran Lane Moffett, for adding your wisdom, your expertise to the conversation about a new class is in session. Now, even though this is the wrap up for the end of this week, this really is the peak, let's say the peak of the project, whereas we have lived over the past couple, let's just say months, with a number of atrocities, let's just say atrocities that have impacted our health, our education, and our welfare in terms of the economic instability that uh, these two major events over the last year and a half have, how they've impacted, again, not just here, but around the globe. And surprisingly, I'm proud, even though it was a disastrous situation, that one of the atrocities that occurred here, just here in the States, rang throughout the world, and the support over the death of one of our comrades literally was mirrored, but the support was mirrored around the world. And that was just, it was fantastic to see that other people stood up for the lives of Black folk.
Yeah.
The disengagement as a result of everybody being quarantined, and therefore the access to internet, the access to appropriate education for, again, P20, for basically colleges and universities were quicker and more able to shift. But of course, folks in the P12 world had some hurdles to climb. I'm also glad that, as your shirt says, Black faculty matter, that Black
Yeah.
faculty were able to, of course, wrap their arms around. They were able to shout out, or not shout out, but share the wealth to the people who are coming behind them and say, hey, make sure you go reach out to your communities, your local communities. And to those families who stayed in the trenches with us during this period of time, I say to you again, there are options moving forward. You have lived through this period where you had to go back to basics and be the primary educator for your children. Reach out to the people in your community if you were an essential worker and you had to go back into your own job and get, Miss Annie down the block to kind of help you with your kids and with your children. And you had to get some of the teachers maybe who were retired, or teachers who thought that they were done with their work and they had to sort of come out of retirement, or help additional children. Thank you to all those people who stepped out of their comfort zone and did what they had to do. As we're moving back into the building, again, in the next few weeks, for some in the next few days, just know that these conversations will continue. I really wish that you would, if you wanted to reach out to Dr. Moffett, who is the professor of educational leadership, his information will be available in the title of the post, in the title of the post. And if you want to reach out to me and offer
The
other,
latest book
oh,
is
Go ahead.
The latest book is not about me, it's about all of thee. This is called Navigating Postdoctoral Career Placement, Research, and Professionalism. It's an edited volume that just came out this April. And this book is about those, whoever the sister was that dropped the message about branding. These are stories from people who have gone through the journey of getting their doctorate and want to give back. Because there's more than one way to be first generational. And to your point about what we have overcome, there are three people I need to empower their voices by their names. Dr. Roderick Heath, who is at North Carolina Central University, a young brother who you'll be hearing about. I was his dissertation chair, and his whole focus was on, and he has successfully done it, getting Black men, young men, through college. Wonderful young brother. He is being recognized nationally now. I'm humbled that he chose me to be his dissertation chair. Dr. Roderick Heath. Dr. Nadia Hopkins, a soul sister who did her study, was never a quote athlete, but did her study on social activism of student athletes and those who prepare them. And definitely, last but not least, a sister that you're going to be hearing about as well, and who has assumed a new position working for the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change, Dr. Kalisha B. Graves, whose study we develop a new paradigm or model on. Her study was on the next 100 years of HBCUs. You'll be hearing about the work again, because I'm humbled to know that HBCUs matter. Thank you, Chris Paul and the other athletes and entertainers who are raising HBCUs up again. No disrespect for those who didn't. We appreciate you. We appreciate you, Dr. Doriel Laria, because you're the doctor of digital consciousness.
I love you for that. Thank you.
Because this platform and having a little brother like me to come on and just offer you my heart and my soul of sincerity for whatever it's worth. I did not want to come on here sounding like some pontificating dry professor who is full of himself, because it ain't about me. And I put the emphasis on ain't. It ain't about me. It's about the people who I named that brought me here, and the people who I named that have gone forth, and I just serve to facilitate them, to facilitate their process of being, as they say, new doctors, but having a brand. Because every one of those people I named, their dissertation was a brand of something they want to be transformative and do. But again, I'm humbled. I hope you will one day host a platform where I can bring all those new superstars, because we got to put more people out here all over the country, because I'm not going to be here forever.
So thank you. Let me wrap up by saying the shout out to Sister Aminata Clark Douglas, who earned her doctorate in physical therapy from Stony Brook. Is it Stony Brook? I think it's Stony Brook. So shout out. We have another newly minted, excellent person holding her doctorate in physical therapy. Because listen, when we have bad backs and bad knees, we need some help. Thank you so much to those people who have been here, who have stayed firm and stayed true to journeying with us. I want to say that this not only is just a pause for the cause, because I believe in critical conversations. I, of course, believe in education. I believe in the power and the genius of people, yes, who look like me. And there are going to be a whole lot of people on this digital couch. But I'm very, very, very conscious and intentional of one of the principles of Kwanzaa, which is kujichagulia, which is self-determination, and that is narrating your own story. I will be the first person to say, if anybody's going to tell my story, if it cannot be me, let it be people who look like me. There are many, many stories out there. I want to be one of them who tells the story of people that I know who do great things. And that's why the Digital Couch was created, not just for people here, but people across the world. I thank you so much. I look forward to, if you want to hear more, of course, thank you so much. Drop some information in the chat. Those people who will be seeing this on the replay, #replay. If you know someone who should have seen this information or who just wants to run down of these names, tell them to come on back. Not just like it on Facebook, but also follow us on YouTube. Follow Learn to Grow You. Follow the Digital Couch on YouTube, where you can also get this information. Peace and blessings. This is a Learn to Grow You moment where I plant seeds to help you grow. And this has been another episode of the Digital Couch. And the focus was a new class is in session. Good night.